This by-election is really hotting up. It's one of the most high-profile by-elections I think we've had for some time. And I want to make it clear to viewers, I'm not a Green Party member. I don't plan on becoming a member of a party because I support the broad left, right? I want your party to do well. I still support figures like Jeremy Corbyn, Zara Sultana, all those activists who joined your party. But as is clear, the Greens have the momentum. So yes, you will see my strong support for the Greens in this by-election. And yes, to people, it might look like I'm a Green Party member because in this particular instance, because I think it's really important. You know, it's a working class plumber versus an elitist TV show host. But today I want to focus this video on Matt Goodwin and Reform. And I'm going to explain why he in Reform will punish the working class. Now, this video is actually for Reform supporters or those that are thinking about supporting Reform or voting for them. And I imagine most people watching will be on the left. So you're welcome to deploy these arguments. But this is me trying to speak to those who tend to vote right wing, who wouldn't usually vote for the Greens, and make the argument that we can drop our personal emotional feelings we have about a particular brand or party name. Now, the vibe people get from the Greens is that they are not working class, they're middle class liberals, and that view is shared across the political spectrum. I mean, including a lot of leftists. So if you're a Reform guy, part of the appeal is that, for Reform that is, they kind of feel like some sort of salt of the earth working class party, not the woke liberal melts of the Greens. And I want to invite you to drop these predisposed feelings of any party, listen to the arguments I put forward, and you may not change your mind, and that is absolutely fine. I just thank you for your time and for listening. Now, the policies of the Greens are the most pro-working class party out of all major parties, specifically economic policies. Now, we went through a revolution in the 1970s and 80s, the Thatcherite revolution. She slashed taxes on the wealthy, privatized industries, destroyed unions, and working class solidarity. And since then, we've not changed course. Successive governments, Tory or Labour, have adopted Thatcherism. Tony Blair, was the heir to her. He accelerated the private finance initiative. He didn't change the economy in a fundamental way. And when the Tories won, their response to the global financial crash caused by the bankers wasn't to jail them, but to give them bonuses and brought in austerity. Got all of us to pay for the crimes of the rich and powerful. And as a result, 330,000 people were killed from austerity. Labour under Keir Starmer, despite promising change, did no such thing. The once working class party of socialists and trade unionists now take millions of pounds from big business, just like the Tories. And has Starmer fundamentally changed our economic system? Of course not. Public services are still in private hands. No wealth taxes, no industrial policy. He did make cuts to welfare and the winter fuel payments, and he's bringing in digital ID. I mean, that's something, right? I mean, he's hated by everyone. The Green Party's economic policy is a complete break from neoliberalism, a wealth tax bringing down inequality, public services being nationalised, no more assaults on unions, using the state for strong investment rather than leaving everything to the market. I mean, look around you. Everything is crumbling. The high street is dead. And I'm sorry to say, but quite a lot of England is ugly. I mean, not the green spaces, of course. Nature is beautiful. But many parts of this country, quite frankly, is ugly. And the amount of empty buildings wasting away, potholes, and some places looking like a wasteland, that is the result of leaving everything to the market. The market allocates resources based on return capital, not human need. It's why all investment is in big cities. These are financial hubs. Why would the market put resources in small little towns? And when politicians say, oh, we need to revive the high street, we need to have more money in towns, unless these politicians are willing to ditch free market dogma, even their best efforts, it won't work because capital doesn't see us as human beings as worth it. If there's no financial value, then so be it. The Greens want to build more council houses, making rents cheaper or putting controls on them. So that leaves Reform. What's their economic policy? It's more Thatcherism. I mean, Reform's London mayoral candidate, Lady Cunningham, recently called for more Thatcherism on GB News, the thing we've been living under for the last 50 years.
Thatcher was absolutely great for the country, and we need a bit more Thatcherism because, yes, we do believe in enterprise.
Selling off our public services so that we can now pay foreign companies for our public services.
Now, Reform doesn't have much of an economic policy. All they say is they're going to cut taxes. Now, the Republican Party in the US always says that, but they cut taxes for the wealthy and raise it on the workers. But will reform even cut your taxes? Well, Darren Grimes is the deputy leader of County Durham. He's a reform councillor. Of course, he's a media personality turned politician. He said that reform will cut your taxes. His council just raised taxes on the poorest. Meanwhile, they're blowing hundreds of thousands of pounds on flags, and another reform council spent £600,000 on private parking spaces. Now, Matt Goodwin hasn't mentioned bills, cost of food, rent, mortgages, anything like that since being announced as a candidate. In fact, he said nothing about the cost of living. He believed that immigration was people's number one issue, and we're going to speak about immigration in a minute. It was only after he did some canvassing sessions that he realised the number one issue for people is cost of living. He then put out this video.
I'm Matt Goodwin, and I'm down here in Denton talking to local people today about what they are concerned about. And you know what's funny? Keir Starmer and Labour MPs say they are the party of working people. But what people here are telling me, number one, the biggest issue is the cost of living crisis. They're getting absolutely battered by the highest tax burden since the 1940s. I've just walked down Market Street. Small businesses, family-run businesses are getting absolutely torn apart by record taxes, national insurance tax rises, soaring energy bills, business rates. And they say to me, the Labour government, Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves, do not understand what it takes to run a small business.
Notice he has nothing to say. He mentioned cutting taxes. And here's the problem. Cutting people's taxes does very little to help improve lives. A tax cut is nice, but those of us who pay the 20% tax rate, what's more important? That your bills are down and wages are higher, or you get 1 to 2% off your taxes. In terms of the local economy, how will they cut people's taxes? Councils don't have the luxury of the Bank of England where they can just create money. It's actually a household budget. So in order to fund tax cuts, they will have to cut from elsewhere. And after 14 years of austerity, councils are fucking struggling. They've been starved for over a decade. They need more funding, which is why despite the party of tax cuts, they were forced to abandon that policy. And that's a clever trick that the right-wing parties pull. They talk about tax cuts, pretending it's easing the cost of living, but most of our money doesn't go on taxes. People are paying half their wages on rent or their mortgage. Then they have to pay for bills on top. So what's a small tax cut going to do? Very little. Let's talk about the people in reform. Nigel Farage is an ex-City banker, an ex-Tory. He often says he rallies against the elite and the establishment. He is the establishment. The establishment are the billionaires, corporations and CEOs and the politicians that serve them, not liberal academics. Although the irony is that Matt Goodwin believes there's this new elite which doesn't include the billionaires and capitalists, but graduates and academics. And guess what? Goodwin is an academic and graduate. So by his own standards, he is the elite. He's literally saying to people, I am the elite. Farage was just flown to Davos, paid for by a billionaire. The party also receives millions of pounds in donations. They got £2.3 million before the 2024 general election. So they're no different to Labour and the Tories. Now, I had a funny exchange with Matt Goodwin today, and it shows he really has nothing. So I shared this post of Matt Goodwin, and this is Matt Goodwin saying, oh, you know, the campaign trail's going really good. And of course, it's a picture of him and Nigel Farage inside, laughing along with a worker, and Matt Goodwin's pointing at him. And I thought it was very apt. So it was a funny image. You got two men in suits. One is very wealthy. I don't know how wealthy Goodwin is. They're sitting inside the warm and they're pointing and laughing at the worker outside. Again, this was an image shared by Goodwin. It's supposed to show everyone laughing together, but I was merely observing that this picture shows the true reality. The higher classes are laughing at us, while the worker laughing back thinks he's part of it, but he's being duped into voting against his own interests. Anyway, not a serious tweet, just an observation, yet so many replies from people saying that I didn't understand the image. And the funniest one was someone telling me to lawyer up. Goodwin quote tweeted me and said, "You missed the significance. Workers used to back Labour, now they back reform. Everywhere I go in Gorton and Denton, it's the same story. I used to vote Labour, but they treat us like second-class citizens. Now I'm reform." Look at his face. Finally, someone is speaking up for workers. And by the way, Matt Goodwin is wrong that reform represent workers. We'll touch upon that in a second. But he doesn't know that I also hate Labour. And whilst he's right, Labour abandoned the working class, reform don't support the working class. The same reason to which Labour abandoned the working class is the same reason why reform doesn't support the working class. Matt Goodwin's argument is, well, because we saw higher immigration under Labour, that means they're anti-working class. No, what makes Labour anti-working class is they become elitist. They become supporters of the billionaire class and big donors. They're happy for the richer to get filthy rich. They were happy to adopt Margaret Thatcher's reforms. Reform have the exact same policy on that. So that's why they're both anti-working class. And I responded with this. I'm not a Labour supporter. You don't stand for the working class. And you're a charlatan. You're an academic and journalist, a member of the so-called new elite you rally against. What will you do about bills, rent, mortgages, and public services? Reform or the oligarch party? He then said, I'm not sure debating someone who has burned neoliberalism in their bio is an apt use of time. Canvassing, good luck. To which I said, what an odd response. Thanks for showing me that you have zero answers. I hope Gorton and Denton reject you and reform. We don't need a party where its leader is jet-setting to Davos paid for by a billionaire. He has nothing. I mentioned his lack of policy on bills, on rent, and the cost of living, that reform are the party of the rich, just like the Tories and Labour, and his response was to talk about my Twitter bio. These people have nothing. Nothing for the working class. They exist to advance their own class, the top 1%. Now let's talk about immigration. Many people will agree with the Greens on their economic policy, but can't get over immigration. For many people, immigration is their number one issue. And I'd like to say, first of all, that despite the right wing saying this, no left wing party or project has seriously pushed for open borders. But that's the criticism we get. There's a world of difference between defending immigrants from unfair attacks and dispelling myths that everything is to blame for immigration and wanting open borders. And when you hear people say on the left, we want a world without borders, that's not a policy right now. That is wanting a future where the world doesn't have borders. The Greens are not proposing open borders. I, right now, do not call for open borders. I want a fair and managed migration system that doesn't break up families. So then the conversation shifts to, well, we need to dramatically reduce migration. And yes, and that's not Green Party policy. That's true. The question I ask to those who want low immigration is why? If the answer is, we have a housing crisis, we have unemployment, waiting times on the NHS are too long, don't want wages to be undercut, I say that's not because of immigration. The NHS has faced real-term spending cuts, but more importantly, what isn't talked about is the private leeches in our healthcare. Because even if we increase overall spending, it's not reaching the front line, it's going to private contractors who are making a profit. They all need to go. Green Party policy is to end privatisation of the National Health Service. Housing. The crisis began of Thatcher, the housing crisis, and the increase in landlordism, namely right to buy. It's not a supply and demand issue, because in 2019, we had the most amount of stock ever. Yet we still have a housing crisis. Why? Because we had and still have a lack of council houses and a lack of houses for people to actually live in. It's going to big-time landlords purchasing the stock and renting them out for profit. It's those people who are causing the housing crisis. Immigration doesn't undercut wages. Multiple studies have shown that not to be true. But to explain why, because I appreciate that when you get these sort of milquetoast liberals on TV, they're very bad at explaining this, right? They'll say, well, studies show that's not true, and that's it. They don't explain how. So as demand increases, so does supply. And when thinking about immigration, people always see it through the lens of one of them. You know, there's too many people in this country and there's not enough to go around. That's a fallacy. It's not the way it works. More immigrants, more people spending into the economy, this creates more jobs. So rather than it being a finite amount of jobs with an endless supply of labour, jobs expand too. Now, if your answer as to why you want immigration to go down because you don't like seeing so many foreigners, I can't help you on that one. That is something we fundamentally disagree on. But as I said, the Greens nor the left at large have proposed open borders. Overall, what I find ironic about reform and the wider right wing is that they are obsessed about talking about what the working class want without ever acknowledging class. The right will say the working class want lower immigration, therefore that any party that doesn't commit to this is automatically anti-working class. That's their line of attack. Yet notice they also don't have anything to say about people's class position. They have nothing to say about actually being a member of the working class. That class is based on your relationship to production. They don't say, do you know what the working class want and need? They don't have ownership or autonomy. They have no say on how the economy is run or their workplace. Something that is fundamental to being working class. In fact, the right wing just lecture what working class politics is. Now, last night I was watching Helena No Justice, and she made a fantastic point, which I think we should all use. She said that Reform supporters act like they're the arbiters and gatekeepers of working class politics, that they truly represent the working class. That's not actually true. Polling has shown that working age people back the Greens. So when those aged between 18 and 49 are asked who they support, the Greens are the #1 party. They're the most popular party. So whether you like it or not, the Greens are the most representative of working people. It's just that Reform have huge support from older people, and they're the ones most likely to vote. So do your class a favour, and on behalf of the majority of working people across the country, you need to vote for Hannah Spencer in the upcoming by-election.